Hello, everyone. I hope you're doing well. So, in today's mini class, we're going to talk about using antes de, después de, and luego de for before, after, doing something or something. And I'm going to explain what I mean by that. So, in Spanish, to express before or after, like before something or before doing something, and after something and after doing something, we use the prepositional phrases antes de and después de. Let me give you an example of antes de plus a noun. Voy a ducharme antes de la cena. Voy a ducharme antes de la cena. La cena is a noun. So antes de plus a noun. Voy a ducharme antes de la cena means I'm going to shower or I'm going to have a shower before dinner. Then we also have después de or luego de plus a noun. In Latin America, después de and luego de are synonyms. It's still more common to say después de, but some people say luego de, and it's natural. It sounds very natural as well. It's just that luego de tends to be slightly more formal. But let's see some examples. Después de la fiesta, llamamos a un taxi. Después de la fiesta. So después de plus a noun. After the party. Después de la fiesta, llamamos a un taxi. After the party, we called a taxi. Now we can actually say the same sentence with luego de instead of después de. Luego de la fiesta, llamamos un taxi. Which means the same thing. After the party, we called a taxi. Now something very important, and you may have already noticed this in the examples that I just mentioned, how after the preposition de, the noun is preceded by its article. So, antes de la cena, después de la fiesta, which takes us to one of the two contractions that we have in Spanish, which is the contraction del. You already know, or most of you already know, that del, del, is the contraction of de plus el. So the preposition de plus the article el. Remember that if the noun is masculine, you will find the contraction del in this case. So, antes del partido. Partido means game, like a football game. So, antes del partido, before the game. Let's do some more examples with antes del and después del. You know, like I already said, we're going to use antes del and después del with masculine singular nouns. Por ejemplo, antes del examen, before the exam. Antes del viaje, before the trip. Antes del desayuno, before breakfast. Antes del trabajo, before work. Después del evento, after the event. Antes del concierto, before the concert. O después del concierto, after the concert. Notice that the contraction del only applies for the masculine singular nouns. If the noun is plural, even though it's masculine, we are not going to contract. Por ejemplo, antes de los exámenes, before the exams. Antes de los viajes, before the trips. Antes de los eventos, before the events. Antes de los conciertos, before the concerts. Then we could use después de with all these examples as well. It's the same rule. And for feminine singular nouns, there is no contraction needed. So we would say después de la clase, antes de la clase. Después de la cena, antes de la cena. Después de la reunión, antes de la reunión. Después de la película, antes de la película. No contraction. Now, like I said before, we can also use antes de and después de with verbs. and the verbs are going to be in their infinitive form. Let's begin with antes de plus a verb, infinitive verb. Fui a su casa antes de ir al gimnasio. Fui a su casa antes de ir al gimnasio. I went to her house or to his house before going to the gym. Now let's move on to después de. Después de plus a verb, infinitive verb. Después de cocinar, quiero ver la televisión. Después de cocinar, quiero ver la televisión. After cooking, I want to watch TV. Después de comer en el parque, fuimos a pasear. Después de comer en el parque, fuimos a pasear. After eating in the park, we went for a walk. After eating in the park, we went for a walk. And just a key grammar note, it's important to notice that in Spanish, the verb after the preposition de is in the infinitive form. Remember that the infinitive form of a verb is when the verb is not conjugated, like comer, hablar, trabajar, vivir, estudiar, comprar, vender. That is the infinitive form. Why am I saying this? Because in English, you normally use like after and after before, you normally use verbs in the gerundio form or gerund, which is verbs in ing. Like after going to the gym, I took a shower. In Spanish, it would be incorrect if you say, después de yendo al gimnasio, tomé una ducha. No, you wouldn't use a verb in gerundio in Spanish. You have to use a verb in the infinitive form, like después de ir, no yendo, so not going, but después de ir al gimnasio, tomé una ducha, o me duché. Después de ir al gimnasio, tomé una ducha. So, just to contrast, not everything translates directly or literally to the language that we're learning, and this is the case for this one. Well, this is the end of this short explanation. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope it's useful for you. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you soon. Ciao.